Welcome to Beyond the Velvet Rope with Neil Oates Jr., the podcast that takes you on an extraordinary journey into the world of luxury service. Join us as we unlock the secrets, stories, and strategies behind exceptional experiences. From anticipating VIP needs to crafting unforgettable memories, we'll guide you on a path to service excellence in the realm of the affluent. Let's elevate your expertise and redefine the art of world-renowned service. Here's your host, Neil Oates Jr.
Welcome to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Today's guest is Andrew Gold, Vice President of Wealth and Tax Strategy at Prestige Wealth Management in Southlake, Texas. Andrew helps individuals take control of their finances, grow their wealth, and keep more of what they earn, leveraging strategic tax planning, smart deductions, and real estate insights every step of the way. Welcome Beyond the Velvet Rope, Mr. Andrew Gold. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Yeah. Thanks, Neil, for having me on today.
Man, it is an honor, a privilege. I'm excited about this conversation that we're going to have, and I know the audience is going to benefit from it. But I mentioned some things, your position, the company, what you do, but would you share something with us that I did not mention in your introduction, Andrew?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, and thank you for the great introduction, by the way. I think that, times are interesting right now in terms of everybody's household budget. Whether you're starting a business or you have an existing one, everybody is kind of feeling the same thing, which is how do I turn this model, which we've been sold our entire life as adults, right, is exchanging time for money. How do we, break out of that envelope and be able to find ways to have money coming into our bank account, without us having to exchange that time? And so I think that that's where, platforms like yourself, you teach people to be a little bit more efficient with all things, in their business and their personal lives and ways to get that step up. So I'm excited today to talk about some of these things.
Man, how are you going to go right there off top? So now the ladies and gentlemen, Andrew, they're sitting here like, man, that's what I want. I'm tired of exchanging time for money. But let's go back. You already mentioned something. And ladies and gentlemen, this is how you know this guy is gold. First, his last name. I absolutely love it. And now I'm going to make a statement, and it's not an identifier, but a money man with the last name Gold is golden, right? I don't think that you could write the script any better than that. But you mentioned this thing that we've been sold and told and taught as adults, right? Time for money, time for money. And many of us, that's the only thing we know. So where do we begin? Because I know you don't only talk about the financial side and the spreadsheets, but it also is mindset for you. Let's make sure we change this and this. So how do we start changing that? But all I've seen are my parents, my grandparents, my colleagues, my coworkers. We're all exchanging time for money. And now Andrew is coming here and saying there are different options, different ways. Where might we begin?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we always talk about, especially with younger individuals, like you mentioned, mindset. I always reference, something along the lines of psychology, and we call it like family genetics around money. And so like financial genetics, if you would, where it's like we are really learning those behaviors around money from a very early age based on what our parents do, whether they're successful with managing money or whether they're not. I think just like with most decisions in our life, we come to that fork in the road whenever we start to go into adulthood, and we have to make that choice. We can see exactly the results of what we've seen so far. We can either do the same thing if that's been successful, or we can pivot and go the opposite direction and try to do things a little bit differently. And I think that having that just awareness, when it comes to money, we always say that that's like some of the most intimate details of our life. And
right.
To the point that a lot of the times we don't even share a lot of things with our spouses around money because either we're ashamed about it or whether we're trying to figure it out and we want to be that man right in our family. And so it's one of those things where, we've got to, kind of like call it what it is and figure out ways to put our money in certain packages to either work for us passively, to be able to provide the right type of mindset and where our money is and how it is available whenever we need it. Because, I mean, especially if you own a business, it's just a matter of time before we need a little bit of an emergency fund.
So it's inevitable. I'm already saying, ladies and gentlemen, I had a list of questions, but as Andrew is talking, new thing, and I believe that valuable insights are coming to me, and I want to bring those to the audience, Andrew. So you mentioned that especially when we're working with or talking to young people, especially when we're working with or talking to young people, why is that one of your missions? And I know you have a mic and you're on mission, but why is that one of your missions to address this before we get to 40, 50 years old? And what impact are you seeing with that with some of your clients, potentially, your younger clients?
Yeah, I think that, the mindset shift for millennials and those younger are completely different than our parents. And, when we look at history, the same, real estate, for example, the same real estate investor, that was back in 2008, is the same person that it is today. Meaning that as time goes by, we want to see new people come out into the work market, be able to build wealth and be able to find that one thing which historically has been the largest wealth driver of our life, which is real estate and our primary residence. And so the reason why the younger generation to us is super important is because that gap is widening, right? And we're seeing in all of our communities, people are waiting longer to have children. People are, in school and taking on more and more debt. Obviously, waiting longer to get married in general too, because they don't feel like they're financially secure. And so I think that especially on platforms like this, the more that we talk to people that are sub 35 and starting to create those good behaviors will put us in that position where we're willing to go down on a knee for our lady. We're willing to get our kids that early jump start on education and having those good things kind of imprinted into our lifestyle.
Okay, so I've had an opportunity to interview guests and to have them on the show. And there's something that jumped out at you that makes us kindred spirits. And I know in business we have to be careful because we aren't supposed to talk about religion and politics, right? But I love the fact that when I was doing my homework, I was doing my research on Mr. Andrew Gold, you identify yourself as two key things that I absolutely love and they hit my heart. So first, you describe yourself as a Christian, a husband and father, and then you talk about your profession. Then you talk about your training. Then you talk about what you do for a living. But who you are in Christ, number one, like that. I don't like this. I'm like, oh man, we've got the winning formula already. But then you went husband and father, and then the money. So let me ask you, and my audience is one where many of them think like we think, right? They have the same desires, they have the same priorities, and they follow the principles, especially those biblical principles. And so, how does your faith and family life shape the way you approach wealth and business, even with your clients?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, 100%. Usually, faith, religion, and money and finances, usually those aren't all in the same conversation. But I think that, if this is why we're here, obviously spread the word. So I think that, at the end of the day, from a religious standpoint, like, we're supposed to be good stewards of our money. It's not our money, right? We're just put in
Hey,
a position.
come on, Andrew. Let's go. Talk that talk, sir.
Yeah, so I think that if we all kind of take that mindset and be like, we're put in this position to manage this money because it is the blessings and the things that we've been given and to be put in charge of, right? And so if we take that mentality and kind of go home with it, then I think that works backwards in terms of like, hey, this isn't, it's my ego, right? This isn't a part of it. This isn't has nothing to do with me. The more that I take these principles and I apply it, my household with my children, you know, the more that we can take that and run with it, the better off that it's going to be for not only us, but the people that we work with. And I think, the reason why I love that post COVID, a lot of people are being able to find educational content is because there is a platform for it. There's plenty of people out there that, have plenty of questions. They just don't know who and how to ask them. And so in situations like this, there might be somebody, driving to work that may be going over these things in their head. And they're just like, how do I even start? And that analysis paralysis piece is where all of the projects and the conversations and the good behaviors go when you give up that all control and you're like, oh my gosh, please just let me make one right move. And then the momentum starts to shift a little bit.
Okay, and so speaking of one right move and where we start, and you mentioned driving to work or in a car, there was something that I'm not going to say started your journey in this, but there was an accident, and you had some resources and you wanted to do the right thing, but you realized my desire to do the right thing was met with people's unwillingness to help me because you were invisible to them, right? You're coming through and you're saying, hey, I've got the right heart. I've got the right mind. My goals, my desires are in the right place. I want to set this thing up. I need some help. And it was crickets. So would you just share that with us and what you learned from the experience that I'm talking about?
Man, Neil, you've done your homework. Oh, yeah, I'm happy to open up on it a little bit. So, yeah, whenever I was in college, I guess first and foremost, I've always been kind of one of those people like, you know, I want to learn from the ground up. I want to learn from, to prepare myself in the mindset. I want to prepare myself for the good times before they come, right? And, when you're in those, dark, deep moments, those are when you learn the most. And so, I was kind of, honestly, everything happens for a reason, but, I was actually on my way to go visit my friend in the hospital because he had left his phone charger at home. His phone was dying, and I was on my way to the hospital. And
Hold on. So Andrew, this is crazy because you got there, not the way you wanted to. Go ahead,
oh, yeah,
sir.
it gets better. Yeah. So literally in front of the hospital, I was on my motorcycle and guy blew a stop sign, hit me, and I ended up, 2 floors below my buddy who was getting an appendectomy. And so here he is, his phone's dying. He's worrying about his phone dying. And here I answer and I'm downstairs. And I'm like, hey, I made it, man. Don't worry about it. But it kind of put me into a situation where, months went by, ended up, insurance ended up, giving me a $25,000 check. Right. And I'm in college. I know nothing about anything. At the time I was an architecture student and I was, trying to find, a quiet place to learn and study and get through this thing called college, while juggling a job and in athletics and whatnot. And so, I was like, I don't have the knowledge to do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and interviewed a couple people, scheduled some time, and I was kind of received with like, hey, you don't have enough money to work with me. And I think we all have those kind of like hurdles and those resistance in our lives, right? But I think for me, that may have been what I heard is I don't want to work with you. You don't have enough money. What reality is that they're saying that, hey, the cost of me per hour is not going to be able to benefit you as much because I handle complexities and things like that. And maybe that's the angle that they were trying to have. But I heard that I don't have enough money for that person. Right. So I had, like that fork in the road where I said, okay, well, I can just say, I can own that and be like, I don't have enough money. This means nothing. And I can either let it, me squander this money, have it disappear to go into student loans, or maybe go get a new shiny item like a new car or something like that. Or I can really invest in myself in trying to find those principles and, be able to do this for good, bad, or failure, all those different things, but learn it in my own way. And so, and that's what I did. I started studying. I changed my major in school. I switched over to finance. I wanted to understand that. Obviously at the time, whenever I was going through college, you had, The Big Short, you had, obviously this was pre-Wolf of Wall Street, but, you had all these movies, The Boiler Room, and whatnot, Wall Street, that were all out. And, I wanted to learn, not only, it wasn't ever just about money. It was about, how do I protect this?
Right.
Both of my parents, I would say, we're a perfect blend of my personalities. I think that's kind of like all reflective of what we go through. My dad, he was a good earner, but after those bills were paid, I mean, there was no financial planning, and he was like, let's go to the casino, let's go travel, let's go camping for a week, all these different things. And my mom, on the other hand, as we talk about dynamics of the yin and yang, she, because of that, was very, very frugal.
Right.
She was scared to change jobs. She was passed over promotion after promotion because she didn't have a degree. And she ended up working until she was almost 73 years old just because she never could catch up. And so that was something that hit me really hard, is kind of seeing them a little bit more of a, a prisoner to their careers trying to catch up. And I didn't want that to be the case for myself or my family.
Man, so you used a harsh word there, prisoner, right? And I think that's something that's necessary for us, ladies and gentlemen, to hear what we call truth and love, because many of us are prisoners and we don't know it today. But you are on a mission to do something about that. And what you often say is that you're on a mission to teach the strategies they forgot to teach us in school. Right. And that's whether it's elementary, middle, high school, even college. So I want to know for our listeners, what are two or three of the most critical money principles that you wish everyone knew by the age of 25? Because I know that your focus is, if we can address it and start the right behaviors, impart the right knowledge and information, have the right habits at an early age, and set that principle, and then start and continue to carry that into our, I would say, best earning years, will have a better foundation. So what are those most critical principles that you would hope that people have by the age of 25?
Yeah, no, this is a great question because, we do summer internships with our community for kids coming out of school for this very thing. And one of the things, it's not 25, but, I'll use 30 as an example for this one. But, 30 by 30 is something that I try to really kind of implement and dive down deep into our interns that come out of high school. And what that is $30,000 invested by 30 years old. And when you take that, you want to, you got a question?
No. But because we hear that, right? And you say 30 by 30, and many of us, we immediately go to ESPN, right? That's not what you're talking about. So when you say 30 by 30 and we hear it, and then you say $30,000 invested by 30 years old, the first thing that many people will say is, well, that's impossible. It's impossible. But you're saying we have this program, we do this so you've seen it, you continue to do it. And I'm going to assume that you have a plan that you can walk people through and how to make this possible.
For sure. Yeah. So, the big thing is, about 30 by 30, the reason why it's so powerful is because when you have $30,000 invested by 30 years old, if you don't touch it, if you don't add to it at all, that's your first $1 million at retirement just by using compounding interest. And so one of the biggest fallacies that we see is people that are putting these self-imposed determinations and results of their life just because of the big feats that sound too good to fail, like you mentioned, like that. How do we get there? And so once we have that expectation, that little bit of a mindset shift, we can build it backwards, right? So then you look at 18-year-old person coming out of school, maybe they're working part-time and whatnot, getting a 401k match. So then all of a sudden your money starts to work for you a little bit there. That's free money that you can help go towards that 30,000. But really when it comes down to it is trying to get away from that. This is too big for me to fail, right?
Right.
This is so important. Unlike the generations before us, which have had our employers really provide that pension and that income, a lot of the younger generation is concerned about even Social Security being there. And so when we do these education events, especially with kids, we talk about history. We talk about how it doesn't always repeat itself, but a lot of the times it rhymes. It changes over a period of time, and understanding these vehicles that were put in place, they were not supposed to be things that we're supposed to rely on as much
Right.
as we do today. And so, I think regardless of age, most kids these days that are coming out of high school have probably been going to Starbucks with their parents for 10 years, $5 at a time. Gosh, it's $6, $7 at a time now. But little things like that, I always challenge, the kids that come through our program where it's like, find something that feels it all to you, right? If we go to the store and it's $20, if you feel that, if you go out with, for food with your friends and it's $50, or you go to the movies and it's $30, start there and find out that if you could feel that, have that automatically go to your future self. See it disappear and know that it's not disappearing. Know that it's always available, but just get it out of your mindset, out of your vision for just a little bit and see how that is. Once that starts to kind of progress, as you make more money, as you do other things, you can see that money working for you. And then you start to build those good positive behaviors about seeing what passive income looks like. And you're like, hey, I may have to go work for an hour for $10, but I just made $10 over here and I didn't have to lift a finger. Like, that's
Right.
amazing.
Right.
And that over a lifetime is where you get a lot of those good behaviors.
So that's awesome information, great guidance. And so I know that many of my listeners, they're coming in here and they are going to be what we call those first generation wealth builders, right? Those who don't have inheritance, maybe they've seen the wrong financial plans modeled out or financial lack of plans modeled out in the home. So what would you say to them when it comes to where do most individuals, and I know this is a generalization, but where do most people waste the most time or money that prevents them from really getting into the game or even starting that wealth creation journey?
Yeah, I think we're in an instant gratification world. And I think that social media sometimes can.
Man, hold on, Andrew. You supposed to get the people to like us and be nice and sugarcoat things. He's just telling, like, listen, man, instant gratification. I love it. Andrew Gold, ladies and gentlemen. Come on,
No,
keep going,
and I'll
sir.
preface it a little bit. It doesn't mean to be that stark, but yeah. So I think that social media, I think, gives us false expectations of ourselves, and I think from our side, especially when it comes to investments and trying to do things that are too big, too quick. We see those examples. And I call them those highlight reels whenever we look at Instagram and all these different things about people that are successful, and a lot of the kids, especially like that are in our community here in Texas, they're surrounded by people that have achievement anxiety, especially coming out of school. And so you set that expectation on yourself where if you have any sort of not meeting your expectations, it instantly goes against you and creates that negative, kind of confidence in yourself. And so that's something that we're going to have to battle the more that we go into a digital world. I think part of where a lot of people start out wrong is, one, the debtor is always a slave to the deadee, right? So starting off with a negative net worth, which is why student loans and having the right mindset going into college is so important. But credit card debt, going out and financing that car, cash flowing, managing your budget, I think is where it starts, right? And usually that's where, I guess when you get faced with, adversity, right? It's very easy to say, I got to know here. I can't be successful. Oh, I made $10. That's not going to, get me out of my 9 to 5 job. So I'm going to go and do something that makes me happy, right? And so being able to break those into some different tangible items, paying yourself, your future self, being able to pay down debt and being able to be responsible. Self-confidence and education goes a long way. And I think that that's where we try to do a really good job of meeting people.
Awesome job. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to remind you that we're here with Andrew Gold. And so you talk wealth and tax strategy. So that means there's some planning involved. And part of that planning is what you just mentioned, this idea of paying yourself first. Andrew, how can I pay myself first if I don't have enough money to pay everyone, right? And so we love the idea, but this isn't just theory for you. It's not just philosophy. This is something that you had to implement yourself, even as a young man having a new family. You say, hey, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to pay myself first. Could you just explain that to the audience and what it really means to pay themselves first, and what might be some strategies to get them there if they don't find themselves thinking that mental side that they are able to pay themselves first?
Yeah, I think that, I always used my future self as like, I kind of viewed that as like a bill, right? And so I view my future self as an addition to my rent, as an addition to the bank that I pay my car payment, credit card bills, utilities. Envision that person as a separate entity from your own body. And, even if it's something, like I said, 30 by 30, you can start there with 5, 10, $15. There's ways to be, both long-term successful, but also not necessarily add any additional burden to yourself on a weekly or monthly basis, but start very, very small. And going back to that Starbucks example, what if it's just $5 a week that's being able to be pulled out of your account and go somewhere else? Find those little things that you can carve that out. And I promise you, and there's apps out there like, I think, like Chime, and I don't remember exactly what the one is where they'll automatically round your transactions up to the next dollar. Acorn maybe, and they separate it. Little things like that. The reason why those platforms even exist is because they work. And part of the reason why there's such a big struggle, especially with the earlier generation, younger generation, is because one, we don't feel like we have access to those types of features. And two, we don't instantly see those results, which make us feel more confident about our progress.
Right.
And so even though it's like, oh, I spent 71 cents here, they rounded up an extra 29 there, that may seem like that. What is that doing for me? 29 cents isn't getting me out of my, my server job or anything like that. But I guarantee you, you do that for a couple months and those 29 cents turned into dollars and then turned into tens of dollars. So that's one piece, is just having like good expectations. The second piece is, and this is something that we talk about a lot, inflation is a word that a lot of people are more familiar with nowadays. In a very basic sense, inflation is our bills and expenses getting larger over time for our cost of living. And I think the big thing about that, which holds us back, is if our money isn't moving for us, right? If Chase Bank or any of our credit unions or anything like that are paying us, 0.3% or zero, that's not keeping up with our grocery bill.
Correct.
So doing that due diligence and research, we can get 4, 5, 6% on just cash right now because interest rates are so high. So like being able to let that move for us gives us a fighting chance in the future.
Okay, so you're talking, and this is where we're going now. Now we're going into some of that brilliant mind of Andrew Gold. And so we talked about wealth and tax strategy, and you make the complex simple. And that's a benefit to us as listeners and the audience. So we're going to talk taxes for a moment, Andrew. What's one simple but overlooked strategy that could help people legally keep more of what they earn? So it's going to be fairly simple, easy for us to do, but we just don't know to do it.
Sure, yeah. Technology and employers are doing a good job of it, more recently and because of technology. But really, the greatest way to get off the ground is by taking advantage of your employer match. Most people are going to be auto enrolling their employees into their employer match program. So let's say, for example, you have 3% withheld from your paychecks every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks or whatever the case may be. But by participating in that retirement, again, looking at ourselves, our future selves as that bill, it gets pulled out pre-tax. So it does help you on the net money that gets deposited in your check. But
Right.
again, that's a great way to have that out of sight, out of mind money. And, as a money manager, like it's really hard to beat 100%. So if you're putting in 3% and your employer is giving you 3%, you're already getting 100% return on your money. Like that's a great deal. You do that over a course of a time, keep track of it, please. Fidelity did a study recently that there's hundreds of millions of dollars that are unclaimed 4Ks out there of people that have had that money pulled out, but they change jobs, they move,
Right.
and it's just sitting out there waiting to be claimed. And those are things that, got to be good stewards of our money, right? So,
Absolutely.
but that's one piece. The second thing is let's say, for example, you've been with an employer for a good period of time and you have that nest egg built up. That doesn't stop you from borrowing from your 4K to consolidate credit card bills, to go ahead and pay off some debt that might give you some more cash flow into your household each month. Most plans, even if you're young and you're still actively working for it, will allow you to borrow up to 50% of your vested balance, up to $50,000. So before you go and get that 12, 15% personal loan or credit card consolidation, go ahead and look at your future self, because that's the best borrower. You're the best borrower to be for your future self. You're borrowing money tax free. You're getting rid of that interest that's going to the big bank man. You're paying yourself that back over future earnings and really putting yourself back into a situation of strength rather than putting yourself further in the holes.
Awesome information there, Andrew. So I want to ask you, so you're giving us high level, but then also simple, actionable items that we can take. For us, we might be overwhelmed already. We're like, okay, Andrew, I hear what you're saying, but once again, we don't know where to start. So let's back up even further. How important is it that we as employees, employers, individuals, entrepreneurs have a sound mentor, a sound money manager, a sound financial planner? And what does a good one look like? Because if we're starting this journey, if we're just now getting to the point where we can go beyond the velvet rope, how do we know who to choose, who to take advice from? What are some red flags or some green flags that we should be looking for in someone that's in your niche and in your industry?
No, absolutely. Yeah. I think that first and foremost, whenever you're looking for a professional to work with, interview at least two or three of them. You want to find somebody that's in the same personality type, or maybe they have a little bit more specific interests in the things that you're interested in. This is supposed to be a relationship that you're going to have the rest of your life and you're going to want to build together, and don't necessarily feel like you have to go against that kind of hurdle that I went against, which is either being faced with somebody that's unwilling to work with you for the amount of money that you have. Education can go a long way if that's a route that you prefer. But if you have a small business, find somebody that is self-employed as well. There's certain parameters around education and licensing. Fiduciary is a big word, but what that essentially means is that person is working for you, not for the company or the bank that they're associated with. Licensing can matter as well. In the industry, there's two different types of advisors. There's fee-based advisors and there's transactional-based advisors. And I think just from my personal perspective, if you're working with a transactional advisor, you're going to get transactional advice. If you're working with somebody that, succeeds when you succeed, the chances are the success is going to come quicker because you're working in the same direction. I'll use it as an example. About 10, 15 years ago, I think the word stockbroker, a lot of people are familiar with, for good, bad, or ugly, right? But
Right.
back in the day, you used to call somebody and be like, I want to buy some Microsoft or Apple stock. And you used to pay them for the transaction. And I think that we can all kind of jump to the conclusion of those conversations are now, anytime you talk to that person, it's, I've got another idea, right? And they make fun of it in the movies
Right.
about you find another idea, because that relationship is transactional. But if it's literally about, I want to get to the point where I have more money coming in every month than I have going out, build with somebody that's like-minded, that you would spend time and not talk about money with, and then find a future with that person and interview two or three of them. I think that's good advice.
Great advice. Much appreciated. Now, you've helped people grow wealth through multiple vehicles, right? So it could be through real estate, business, investments. How do you help clients decide where to start?
Yeah, so a lot of our clients, we work with people all over the country, but a lot of clients find us from one or two paths. Usually they have a lot of money in the stock market and they're trying to diversify away from just having exposure to the stock market. Or maybe they have real estate and they're trying to find diversification into the stock market. We're all kind of guilty of investing in what we know. And so, if you're a self-employed individual, you're investing in your business. After you get to a certain point, obviously you want to look for some protection there. And so for us, it all starts with an education. It's like, what are some goals that we have? Is it about managing risk? Is it about diversifying out of our specific niche industry? And real estate and taxes kind of go hand in hand. I'm sure there's a lot of content out there on that kind of stuff. But what we talk about is, one, how do we get organized? Two, what's the end goal? Is it passive income? Is it taxes, avoiding taxes? Is it just trying to find ways to, kind of build wealth in different ways? I think that there's a lot of different ways to take that conversation, but we're not trying to force people into a box. So everything starts with our clients and trying to figure out what their retirement and their future looks like. And, there's different ways to kind of go about that. Taxes and specifically, with real estate investments, a lot of people have kind of gone out there and on the limb of either trying to sell their house at these high markets or buy a house. And a lot of those things is, how do I just get to the finish line? If that's something that's a goal of yours.
Right. And so you mentioned taxes, and I want to make a statement, but then I want your input. So tax planning versus tax preparation. And so would you just explain the value and the importance of tax planning and the difference of tax planning versus tax preparation? Because many of us, we might think, oh, well, we got our taxes done. That's a good enough strategy, but that's not a strategy. That's just something that we're doing because out of a requirement. Would you talk about the tax planning and the importance, especially if our goal is to build wealth and not just for the sake of having money, ladies and gentlemen, but to enjoy life and to really live out our purpose? Tax planning versus tax preparation.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So the difference is that whenever you file your taxes, most people don't meet their tax person until January, February, and there's a lot of different tax strategies out there, but a majority of them have to be implemented before December 31st. So a lot of the times as an investment advisor, we're meeting our clients, multiple times throughout the year. We're having conversations. A lot of the times you're talking about, scaling your business, what your retirement timelines are, what you're spending your money on, little things like that. And so the unique perspective that we have, being able to wear our investment advisor hat as well as the tax side, is being able to say, if we spend our money in these categories, it's going to help reduce our tax bill in April. Not saying that it's a replacement of a good CPA or a tax prepper or anything like that, but I would say that your tax preparation is good for three things. One, making sure it's done on time, making sure it's accurate, and removing the liability of the results from you individually. And so other than that, a majority of CPAs are just overwhelmed with the amount of returns that they're doing, and they're shackled, in a sense of not being able to ask you all those detailed questions about
Right.
where your money went, what the purpose was. And so I think in terms of tax planning, one, it's knowing what your tax bill is going to be will give you a really good fighting chance to avoid it. And then two, it's being able to say, I have some extra cash. If I put it into this is going to be able to save me X amount of dollars. Is that worth it? And then being able to really help reduce what really matters is kind of taking those dollars that would be going to the IRS and putting it back into our budget, which is important.
All right. So, Andrew, we mentioned on the outset of this episode that you lead with you're a Christian, husband, father. And so people hear you and I have this conversation and they're like, these Christian men are talking about building wealth and money is bad. And are they arrogant? Are they egotistical? But how do you balance or reconcile building wealth, or how might we have this conversation with someone who is on the fence, who are saying, well, yes, I want to build wealth, but I also want to stay humble and grounded in my faith? I think you're one of the perfect people to have that conversation with. So what might be some conversation around that piece?
Yeah. So I think that, one of the things that most people kind of get mixed up is, one, attaching your ego to your bank account and your finances. Again, it goes back to being a good steward of your money. If you're going into it as like, this money isn't mine, I'm just here to necessarily, reappropriate the resources to make the most amount of impact. Those are things that we can give back to our community. There are things that we can do to be able to necessarily change the outcomes of lives all over the country by doing good, purposeful things with the resources that we do have. But I think, separating this money from my being, right?
Yeah.
The money that I have in my account isn't because I'm better. It's not because there's people out there that I'm sure do, shady things to put themselves forward. But a majority of the people that have resources didn't step over somebody less worthy in order to get it.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's more of like a societal thing that's been kind of like pressed on us to divide us, not, push us closer together.
Absolutely.
Everybody has the ability to prioritize themselves and put themselves in a good mindset. And one of the things that I talk to my girls about all the time is just having gratitude and being able to say that, like, obviously we're all living in sin. It was Jesus died on the cross to be able to provide us grace and to be able
Right.
to forgive us for the sins that we all and the shortcomings that we're all going to have in our life. And so we have that choice to be able to let those shortcomings define us, or we can come into it with a more of a perspective of, this has already been forgiven. I'm going to take this grace and I'm going to make change in my life to do better for myself, for my family, and for my community. And be able to kind of tie those two pieces together, not let the narrative define our outcomes.
Absolutely love it. Now, you've said a word repeatedly throughout this episode, and that is education, education, education. So we know you understand the value of education, but it's not always traditional education. And what I love is that you're not just teaching people how to make money, you're helping them build legacy. And that's a big part of this mission that you are on. So let me ask Andrew Gold, what does legacy mean to you, sir?
So, I think that two different ways to take the term legacy from my perspective. It's one, passing down the torch to your children to give them the benefit of the platform that you've had in your life from your tough decisions and from your grind and from your growth, without necessarily having to deal with the pain and suffering that came along with that growth. Right. I think when most people think of legacy, they think about leaving money behind to their children and giving them that step ahead. The other piece that we do a lot with is more along the lines of philanthropy and being able to make an impact in your community. And it could be as little as, in the social media world, every community has small businesses that are people that are putting their money where their mouth is, trying to be able to do the things that impact that area. And we saw during COVID, those small businesses in our community, who are our neighbors, who are our friends, who are at our church, and all those different things, the more that we can reallocate our funds to spending the money in our communities can be as big of an impact as you can possibly think of.
Yeah.
And being able to be very intentional with where we put our money and how it aligns with our beliefs. And there's no better time to kind of like revisit that topic, as we've seen, really, individual consumers put their money where their mouth is and where their beliefs are over the last few years in different categories.
Absolutely. So now, Andrew, I'm going to get personal, and I believe in leading by example. So I'm going to ask you this question and then allow the audience to take it as they will. But what's one financial principle you live by that's non-negotiable for you and the Gold household?
Yeah, so many. I think that the one that I truly believe in is again, reverting back to paying my future self, just because I think that hits home for me, of seeing what frugality can be like. And necessarily, I kind of view it as squandering opportunity. And you can take that down the biblical route of being put in opportunities to be able to succeed, and either not being in the right mindset to be able to reach out and grab them, or, necessarily just, squandering that opportunity. And paying my future self is a bar none non-negotiable in our household. We try to divide that out of the budget immediately as soon as any dollars come in. And then, taking it a step further is being able to really be a creature that reaps what they sow, right? Is that it's very easy for us to go out and advise, and it's sometimes harder to take advice. And, I think that it's those principles that if we have good integrity, and that if we're trying to be in a position of education, us as individuals are not immune from the same education and principles that we're propelling out into the community. And so, it's definitely an interesting household for sure. Because sometimes the last thing you want to do is, avoid that new shiny object to pay your future self, but it's got to happen. That's the part of non-negotiable.
Be like, baby, we could. She like, didn't I just hear you tell someone else? And you're like, foiled again.
Yeah.
And so this is where some of our listeners might find themselves. They might find themselves overwhelmed in their current financial situation. And they're at the point, they're listening to Neil and Andrew, and they're saying, if I don't get anything else today, I need one thing. What's my very first step that I should take? What would you encourage them to do?
Yeah, I would say really be honest with yourself. Look at your bank statement. See what money is coming out. See where it's going. And then really
Andrew, that's the hard one, sir. So that's where we have to start. So if we don't like our financial situation, he says, look, take a picture. Look at it.
The mirror is the most honest place. Yeah. And it's hard to say it. I mean, because we're all guilty of it. It's the Amazons, it's the subscriptions, it's the little things like that. My mother-in-law has this famous quote that she always tells us when it comes to purging things in the house is that like, if you haven't seen it in 6 months, you do not need it. And so it's little things like that, that if you can find those bills, you can find those little things. And I'll use myself as an example. I'll go out there. We have this gym membership, right? And I kid you not, it was one of those things where it was like we all start, the New Year's resolutions kind of thing. And it was 25, $30, right? And it's one of those things where it's a big enough thing to be able to see it. It's not necessarily maybe big enough for you to prioritize it. It's like, hey, it's one of those things to be there when I need it. But as an example, if I was looking at my bank statement, I'm like, I need to get this thing off of here, right? Instead of just canceling it and saying that $25 is going back into my Starbucks budget, what if I took that 25 and pay my future self? Forget about it. As hard as that is, you forgot about it before. I haven't gone to the gym in 2 years. You know what I mean? Like that $25 a month, that adds up. And before you know it, that can be a good amount of money that can, when that opportunity comes knocking, you can jump on it.
Man, that is absolutely fantastic, and thank you for sharing that. So my last question before we have some fun is, where can we go to learn more about Andrew Gold, what he has going on, and where can we follow you, sir?
No, yeah, absolutely. So, I'm pretty active on Facebook. We have like a bi-weekly newsletter that goes out there that talks about, market commentary as well as some fun things. If you're really looking into taxes and budgeting, understanding credit score, stuff like that, I've got a lot of good content on it. So if you go to Facebook, it's at PWealthMGMT, and that'll pull up my business page, Andrew Gold Prestige Wealth Management. Lots of great content on there. Would love to collaborate and answer any questions on that platform.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I know you're listening while you're driving, walking, riding your bike. Don't worry. All of Andrew's contact information, the social media handles, the website is going to be in the show notes. So make sure that you go to the show notes so you can see how you can follow everything that Andrew has going on. So before we go to our next section or segment, I want to say thank you, Andrew, for your time, energy, for your advice, knowledge, and input. I am excited to see what Andrew has going on next, because if I'm not mistaken, you and the missus, you already have 2 girls, and we are expecting another addition to the family very soon, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. February.
So this is a man, when he's thinking about making decisions for his family, it's not just now. He's making legacy and generational decisions. And so I think that's the most sincere individuals for us to follow, those who are doing for themselves, for their family. So thank you for your time here. But now, Andrew, are you ready to have some fun, sir?
Yeah, let's do it. I was having fun this entire time, so.
So we're going to crank up the dial just a little bit. We're going to just do some fun, I believe they're fun, rapid fire questions. I did not let you know what they were going to be, but I must go on the record as saying is that you are not legally obligated to answer any of these questions, okay? I have to make that disclaimer. So if you get in trouble with something that you say here, it's not on Neil, it's on Andrew. All right. First one, favorite color?
Favorite color, green.
Why?
I don't know. We like outdoors. I work in around money. So two of the best greens out there.
Hey, money and outdoors. I love money and Mother Nature. I absolutely love it. Favorite food?
Favorite food, Italian.
Boy, that was a quick answer. Is there a favorite dish? Is there a favorite Italian dish that you just love? That's your go-to?
Oh man, I'm Italian, so it's got to be something along the lines of grandma's lasagna or something like that. But so chicken Alfredo.
All right, there we go. He said, I'm going to stay safe, but I'm going to keep it very Italian. And ladies and gentlemen, the Italian chicken Alfredo is not what we are eating when we go to restaurants, just so we're clear. They're like, that's something like it, right? But that's not the real thing. Mickey Mouse or Bugs Bunny, Andrew?
Bugs Bunny.
Well, that was a quick answer. Come on. Wow. Hey, you didn't even give Mickey Mouse a first thought. Why not?
I got 2 daughters, man. It's Minnie Mouse over Mickey Mouse for sure.
Okay, good stuff there. Batman or Superman?
I'm going to go Batman.
Okay, the Dark Knight is here. What is the best piece of money advice that you've ever received?
Man, I think there was an acceptance speech that I think it was Matthew McConaughey did as he was accepting an award. And he was talking about mentorship and chasing his future self 10 years from now.
I remember that.
And I think that, when it comes to money, I think that try to really envision what your circumstances are, what your living situation is, how big your family is, what your kids are like, in that 5-10 year period from now, and truly set those money goals or financial goals, those family goals up. I've gotten so good at it because I've been doing it for so long that I can look at my daughter and I can see her already graduating high school,
Come on,
and
man.
it
I
just
love
breaks
it.
my heart, man. She's getting too old too quickly, man. I'm not going to get sentimental on here, but yeah, those things. Is just being able to have that vision, paying your future self, and really sticking to it. Don't give up.
I thought you were gonna say you look and you see your baby graduating and you're excited and you're cheering. You're like, man, my heart is breaking every time I see it. Come on, Andrew. What is one talent that you don't have that you wish you did?
Man, answering good rapid fire questions on podcasts. No, I wish I could sing. I wish I could sing. I think that'd be
Now
pretty
hold
cool.
on, hold on. Now see, this might be a limiting belief, a self-imposed limiting belief. So my audience and I, Andrew, we are willing to do a live audition right here, and we'll give you honest feedback. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're hearing it here first. Andrew Gold is going to perform live on air, and then we'll judge whether or not you can sing. Are you open to it, sir?
I think if anybody wants to hear me sing, they can just go on Spotify and search Andrew Gold. Thank you for being a friend. That's the beautiful thing about having celebrities, with your same name, is I will never fill those shoes.
Good stuff. So, one of the questions that I've just recently started asking individuals is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
That's deep, man. I think I could really be happy if I'm the person that my daughters brag about. Like if they're the ones that are going out there and super proud to talk about what their dad does, I think that would be the most rewarding thing out there. The life that we live, the leader of the family, what we do in the community, the impacts that we make. I think if any of those combination of things, it doesn't have to be all of them, but I mean, if they're proud to talk about what their dad does and who their dad is, I think that's the version I want.
I absolutely love it. I believe that is the best answer that you can give. And now, this next one, depending on if you've canceled all of your subscriptions or not for the Netflix, you might not be able to answer this one. But what is the one movie that no matter how many times it's on, you're flipping through the channels, you see it, you stop and watch it? What is that?
Oh man, it's gotta be. There's two of them. So Goodwill Hunting is
Come
one of
on.
them. Being able to kind of overcome adversity, I think is just a great one. The other one, just because of the nature of my industry, Big Short, has got to be one of the top favorites. I could
Okay.
I could watch that until the end of times.
To the end of time. So, Andrew, do you like apples?
Best line ever, and
Best
it's
line ever. Come on,
seeing
man.
seeing how young those guys are remind me of how old I'm getting, in
and
that
and
movie.
and, and so real quick, and then we see these young guys, then we see their friendship, and we see their friendship still happen and be here now, but then we also see cautionary tales, right? And so we see someone who was a great actor and who let life, because we're from the outside looking in and we're thinking that everything is awesome and perfect, and then just to see how life happens to all of us. And so I love Goodwill Hunting, but then when I'm sitting there looking at Robin Williams, I'm sitting there like, man, that hurt, right? And that life still happens. And so that's an encouragement to us. So, Andrew, it has been an absolute pleasure. What do you want to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, I think, I'll kind of end on a high note of just, a little bit more, perspective and motivation. One of the things that we deal with a lot is, in estate planning, being able to help people through that process. And as an example, using Robin Williams, using some of these people, Michael Jackson, for example, Aretha Franklin, all of these
Yeah.
people that are, Heath Ledger, even speaking of Dark Knight, we see that these people that we idolize and that we really see as an influence in our life and our being and enjoy watching. And then you see exactly how even those with limitless money having these kind of family issues, from not planning. I think that nobody is immune to, being successful, and nobody is also immune to having life throw a curveball at them. And so I think that at the very minimum, to all of your listeners out there, start today. Do not delay it another day. Procrastination is, kind of the opposite force that's putting in an imposition on our life. And, so the best day to start is today, and anybody can do it. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise, even if it's yourself in the mirror. So I'll end on that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have just had nothing but gems, jewels, and value dropped on us by Mr. Andrew Gold. Thank you for your time. I'm excited to see where your mission takes you, the difference that you're going to make as you continue to not only educate, but help people create and build legacies that they're proud of. So, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you share this episode. That's all we're asking you to do. Share this episode with someone who you believe will benefit from what Andrew and I had conversation around today. And I'm going to leave you like I always do. And that is that I love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time I see you or you see me, don't be average, be world renowned. Peace. Thank you.